Hi everyone, and welcome back to Whispers of Turkish Stars. If you live for emotional tales, if you want to sit with a cup of tea and feel the heartbeat behind the headlines, you're in the right place. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join to support the channel, because today we're opening a chapter that many thought had been sealed for good, a tender, complicated, and unforgettable chapter in the lives of Özge, Yağız and Gökberk Demirci. For a long time, Özge chose silence. In an industry where every glance becomes a rumor and every sigh is dissected, that silence was her shelter. It was the soft room where she folded her memories neatly and stacked her hopes on a high shelf, away from curious eyes. She smiled on red carpets, stood tall in interviews, and when the questions came, she answered with grace and distance, leaving the rest unsaid. That quiet became a language of its own, a protective horizon, a way to keep her heart whole. But quiet has a way of filling up, overflowing, and in a recent interview, that careful barrier finally lowered. Her voice was steady at first, she has learned how to be steady, but beneath it, a tremor lived. A pause, a breath caught in the throat, and then words that carried the weight of years. She didn't need a script. She didn't need to convince anyone. She simply let the truth sit between her and the world. All I ever wished was to build a home with him. If he hadn't turned away, we would still be standing side by side today. Not an accusation, not a plea, just an admission that a dream had been left halfway, that two hands once reaching toward the same future had lost their grip. For months, she had dodged the subject of Gökberk with a smile as soft as fog. She gave interviews about her work, her preparation, her love for the craft. She praised the teams, the writers, the costumes, the hours that blur into dawn on set. But when his name floated into the air, she would let it drift by, untouched. Friends noticed what the cameras didn't. They saw the way she stayed a little longer in empty rooms after the laughter faded, how her phone sat face down beside a cooling cup, how songs she once loved became dangerous to play. They told us there were no broken plates, no scandal, no furious words thrown like stones. Just a quiet grief that took up residence and refused to leave. One friend, the kind who remembers your birthday without checking a calendar, whispered that everything had been prepared. The dress was chosen, not because it was grand, but because it felt like a promise. The venue had that whispering breeze she adored, where the sea carries secrets and returns them calmer. The music had been picked, a song that begins like a prayer and ends like a sunrise. It wasn't a fantasy board, it was a plan. And yet, life is stubborn. It writes its own twists in ink you can't wash away. He walked away, and with him, a part of her future stepped out into the night. In that same interview, Özge finally traced those days with words she had been hiding from herself. She spoke of a ceremony imagined by the water, of the light that turns the Bosphorus to silver at the hour evening meets night. She pictured the crowd, intimate and real, not for headlines but for hearts. She saw his smile, the one he has when he forgets the cameras exist, the one that softens his entire face. And then she remembered a day that changed everything, not with thunder but with a closed door. There was no dramatic duel, no final scene with rolling credits. One morning, absence was louder than any argument. No goodbye. And in that hollow space, something vital slipped away, the shape of the life she had been building. Those sentences didn't land like gossip. They landed like truth. The public glimpsed the person beneath the spotlight, the woman who learns lines for a living but cannot rehearse the collapse of a dream. She became, in that moment, not a headline but a heartbeat. She mends slowly, we all do, and she carries the memory not to torture herself, but because love, even past love, leaves a gentle trace. She owns it now, and somehow, owning it makes it lighter. Time passed, as it always does, indifferent to ruined plans and paused songs. Then came a twist not even the biggest fans expected. Months later, when the world had grown used to their distance, when their names were rarely spoken together, Gökberk chose a public stage to ask a private question. The air thickened, the city seemed to hold its breath. It was bold, impossibly romantic to some, impossibly late to others. The words were grand, the gestures sincere. Cameras recorded every angle, opinions bloomed like fireworks. And somewhere behind all that noise, Özge stood at a fragile crossroads. She admitted, with disarming honesty, that a part of her wanted to run toward him and the life they once saw at the same horizon. Another part, older and newly careful, wanted to say that time had a cost, that the past cannot be rewound just because the present demands it. She had learned to stand on her own 2 feet, and standing comes with a kind of stubborn pride. I don't hold anger in my hands, she said in her own way. Maybe he chose what felt right for him in that moment. But I'm allowed to say, out loud, that if he hadn't left me with silence, we would still be writing the same story today. It was a confession without surrender, a truth spoken without bitterness. She looked right into the tender center of what had been and said what so many are afraid to voice: I wanted a life with him. Not the glitter, not the applause. The quiet life, the ordinary mornings, the shared coffee, the ring on the nightstand catching the first light. And then the internet did what it always does when a genuine heart is shown. Social media spilled over with messages, not just from fans of the couple, but from people who had lived the same ache in different cities, different languages, different faces. Her vulnerability became a mirror for thousands. Outpourings of love filled her pages. People thanked her for saying what they could not. They noticed, too, how her performances carried a new weight. Watchers of Yemin went back to scenes they had admired and found layers they hadn't named before: a glance that lingered, a breath held, a line delivered with a tremor that wasn't technique but experience. Life had given her a deeper palette, and she painted with it on screen in colors that felt painfully honest. Still, amid the applause and the empathy, she left a slim opening in the window. Real love, she said without saying, doesn't evaporate. It doesn't vanish like mist. It learns patience. It softens at the edges and waits in the quiet corners, not as a demand but as a presence. But she also admitted a new uncertainty. Did she want that love to return as it had been, or had time reshaped it into something that belonged to the past? She stood in that space where memory wrestles with reason, where dignity taps at the door and desire pulls at the sleeve. Meanwhile, he kept his public words few. That silence had a different texture now, not avoidance, but humility. Those close to the circle whispered that he had reached out carefully, understanding that apologies are not currency and promises are not enough. This time, it would have to be action, not poetry, that made a difference. So their story grew beyond the glitter of television trailers and red carpet flashes. It became a lesson the city itself seemed to retell in its waters and winds. Timing is a quiet tyrant, vulnerability is a brave teacher, missed chances leave fingerprints. Even the strongest love needs room to breathe, and if the silence stretches too long, it can thin the very fabric that once felt indestructible. There's a particular sadness in arriving at the right love wearing the wrong clock. There's nothing more haunting than being ready to give everything when the other heart has already packed its suitcase. When the interview ended, the cameras clicked off, the studio lights blinked to sleep, and yet the story refused to close. It followed her to the car, sat with her on the ride home, stood in her doorway as she dropped her keys into a bowl. It echoed in quiet rooms and busy sets. It lingered on park benches and in crowded cafes. She is not trapped by it anymore. She is simply accompanied by it. And perhaps that is what maturity looks like, knowing that the past will walk beside you, gentle and persistent, while you move forward anyway. What comes next? Maybe a new beginning. Maybe a version of the old beginning, rewritten with wiser ink. Maybe 2 paths that stay parallel, waving but never crossing. Or maybe one day, when no one expects it, at an hour when the light turns the city's stones to honey, there will be another conversation that changes the temperature of the air. For now, all we know is that both of them are learning in public how to carry private truths. And that is a courage of its own. Tell us, what do you feel when you hear her words? Do you believe in second chances that arrive fashionably late, or do you believe that some wounds, even when healed, prefer not to be reopened? The stage is yours in the comments. Share your thoughts, your stories, your what-ifs. We read them, we feel them, and we honor them here. If this story touched a soft place in you, if you want more moments like this, told with heart, not just headlines, then like, subscribe, and join to support more stories at Whispers of Turkish Stars. Thank you for being here, for caring, for listening. Until the next video, we'll be right here, watching the city lights, waiting for the next whisper to turn into a story you'll never forget.